Hello, Charlie TCG here, and NAIC is just a couple days away, and I thought I would give my opinion on what the top 8 decks which I think could do well. These are ones which I've done through testing, looking at online results, and most importantly, the huge events that have happened over in Japan and Asia. Trying to combine that to see exactly what you think is going to be the decks which you should potentially test with or be prepared to see at this huge tournament. So I'm going to jump in by my number 8 pick being Miraidon Path. I know I showcased this list only a couple of days ago, but I'm really enjoying this style of list. It's performed pretty okay in my sort of testing. Although it may not have had any of the results it could need in the big tournaments, or even its matchups kind of being a bit iffy, to put it politely, it has one of the strongest abilities on the tandem unit, and consistently potentially hitting over 200 damage is really difficult for anyone to kind of deal with, especially under a path lock. If you think of the likes of Arceus, Lugia, Mew, as well as the likes of Chien-Pao, and even sort of Gardevior as well. These really powerful decks all rely on abilities on rulebox Pokemon. So if you can kind of get your setup down and place a path to peak down, you can really slow down the opponent in any sort of way possible. That's why I've really enjoyed this style of list. And the idea here is very much so simple. You have your normal attackers like Miraidon, Magnezone's really helping the Lost Box, Chien-Pao matchup now, as well as Gardevoir, and then Raikou's a really good secondary attacker. We do have obviously Regieleki VMAX in here to get that big one-hit KO capability which Miraidon can have, because you kind of get your setup and then you can immediately just put path down. Other sort of path decks like Mew and even the likes of Arceus builds can kind of struggle if you kind of get your huge setup turn one, if you go first, and then you put path to peak down. Really slowing down is really, really important. Flapping is really helpful because you're constantly needed to resource and recycle your energies and kind of keep them in play, because even if you're under path lock as well, you're not good, and you don't really have a huge draw engine aside like your Iona, Research, and Avery. So that's why you need your flapping armor to constantly try and get your energies out as quickly as possible. I have made a couple of changes in there. I think 14 energies is definitely what you need in this sort of testing. I've kind of gone to 13, but the amount of times I whiff is insane. And generally the charm card, basically the Cape of Toughness reprint, I generally think isn't really needed in this sort of list. Yes, you can add like Raikou to have 250 HP and Miraidon to have 270, but most Pokemon can already get those big one-hit KOs already. So that's why I've kind of opted to go out of that and kind of go with more energies in this way to constantly try and get out your setup and threaten a turn 1 KO with either Miraidon or Raikou and have that path to peak lock in there. Even though this may not be probably the best sort of pick out there, it's definitely a fun little rogue idea, which I've been really enjoying testing. I know other people have been kind of testing out the list and having some good results in here, but I wouldn't sleep on Miraidon yet, even though it's been replaced by sort of another Glass Cannon deck with Chien-Pao. This Glass Cannon deck is still all right and can still kind of keep up toe-to-toe in certain matchups. My number 7 pick is Arceus Giratina. Now, this deck actually has performed well, has actually got a couple wins in there, and has a really good match around the rest of the format. Only really kind of losing to Lost Box because they can do single price attackers, and with the likes of very high V Pokemon out there, they could slap in a Zapdos or even another sort of attacking options in there for fighting weakness, so it can kind of really perform well in that sort of option there. Starbuff is definitely the strongest star power we have in the game. Ability search any 2 cards there, and really focusing on having the hand disruption of Judge and Iona under path lock is really powerful, because if you get to go first, if you go second and you manage to get out Arceus's V attack to power up a Giratina, you're threatening 280 damage turn 2, which is really scary for your opponent to kind of deal with. And that's why I think this deck is really, really powerful. This one here is the list I've been really working on, kind of playing around with it. You can see we're still focusing a lot more on Judge than we are on Iona, because Iona in this style of deck is very strong in the late sort of game. Flying Pikachu is really key and really important, I still think. Pure on the basis how Lost Box is very, very powerful and kind of like threatening to kind of like stop Lost Box from any sort of damage in there. Yeah, it is your worst matchup. So having that Flying Pikachu, I really like in this list. Spiritomb is definitely that threat. It's stopping the likes of Lumineon and obviously more importantly Genesect V's, which are kind of going around there, but also can slow down some other sort of cards like Zapdos as well, so not getting a big one-hit KOs on your Arceus V-Star. I know Mew is definitely focusing more on the fusion build, especially after it won the tournament happening in Japan Nationals, but Spiritomb is still a really nice inclusion in this one. I've kind of gone more of the cleansing gloves because we are seeing a more increase in Mew as well as of Gardevoir, so Giratina V-Star can immediately get those big one-hit KOs as easy as possible and potentially threaten that as early as turn 2. That's why I really think Arceus Giratina is a really good option for kind of like play testing and definitely wanting to understand it. Definitely being a rogue or horse around the whole format and carrying on with this big trend, which could potentially translate in NAIC. My number 6 pick is actually Chien-Pao, my favorite deck and the one I'll be testing the most. It has actually got a couple of results, being a top 4 and top 8 over it happened, I believe, in Taiwan. But it's also his matchup as well. It's kind of doing all right in the online sort of tournament. It's weird to say it's probably his best matchup is Miraidon, but it can really struggle in certain matchups. But I did do a gauntlet with Chien-Pao, ended up winning sort of against a couple sort of decks, beating the likes of Gardevior, Giratina, as well as Miraidon. So I generally think Chien-Pao is in a good sort of spot. Having a Baxcalibur to guarantee to get attach any energies you like, and having Shivering Chill to kind of search your deck for 2 basic water is really, really powerful. It is definitely in the new sort of Glass Cannon, but if we just look at sort of the updated list I've kind of been playing around with here, we're kind of opting to kind of slow down our Iona and boss sort of counts and really trying to focus on some of the draw aspect. You don't need to play a huge line of Baxcalibur by playing, go down to a 3-2 line, because item lock isn't really popular right now in the format, as well as also you only really have 2 out in the meta game. I really like having Super Rod in this sort of deck, because if potentially they get rid of some of your Frigibass, or importantly, you get a couple more of your Chien-Paos in a discard pile quite early on in the game, you have a way to recycle them, a way to put down more water energy out there, so you can search out with Shivering Chill if you don't have access to your superior energy retrieval. Definitely you have to play for superior energy retrievals. You can't really go less because the whole deck is about discarding energies and then gaining them back in the hand. If you're going with 3, like going down to 3, in theory, attacking 1 less turn. So that's why you have to play a high count of energy retrieval. Do you think having the 2-2 line of Bibaro is really good? Definitely could potentially opt down to go to 1-1 line and have a higher count of Boss and Iona. Potentially that could be your way forward, but I think the 2-2 line is really good. It doesn't get attacked by Radiant Greninja as well as Magazone with your Bidoof, so that's definitely something which is really important. But I think still you want to have that, definitely that counter to Iona, and that's why Chien-Pao, I think, is where I think it is right now at number 6 spot. Not exactly an amazing sort of deck, one which is going to win huge amount of tournaments, but it could definitely go far with it, probably make a couple day 2s and probably be up there, maybe in the graphic, because I remember the big tournament happened over in Japan. This was in fact always up there. It's been 20% of the meta, so definitely something to consider in that sort of, in your playtesting, that Chien-Pao probably be played quite a lot in the tournament. Now, my number 5 pick, it goes to Lost Zone Giratina. In my honest opinion, the definite underdog of the format. It has definitely kind of not had the best reputation, I would say, online. People kind of say it's either a BDIF contender like tier 1 or a tier 4 sort of deck. There's no really in between. And I'm kind of putting it in a tier 1.5 sort of option, I would say Giratina is. Lost Impact doing 280 damage is insane. Pretty much KOing everything. And then you have Star Raccoon on top. If you've got 10 or more in the Lost Zone, immediately the active Pokemon is knocked out. This is good to go around, obviously, like the likes of your Duraludons, if there's one out there, or potentially other Pokemon which have over 300 HP, which Giratina can't get that big one-hit KO. So I really like this, and even its matchup spread as well, doing pretty all right overall. Having a very favored Mew, where some people you can just use Lost Impact, or if you're in a format where you're generally worried about Mew, Drapion is always a really good contender. It has got a couple of results, obviously gained top 4 and a couple top 8s in Japan Nationals. So it has had a good sort of decent run very, very recently. So that's something you should potentially be thinking about when you want to be testing this sort of deck. Obviously, you have the options to have Sableye in this deck, which is really, really powerful. In this option, this is the one which did get top 8, which does play the Spiritomb and high counts of Paths to Peak. I think definitely high counts Path to Peak is really, really powerful because you're only shutting off your Greninja. If you can slow down other decks like Mew or potentially the likes of slow down Lugias and even Gardevoir, you can really help those sort of matchups kind of like keep into a track, and you don't really need to have it constantly. Greninja's really good in the early sort of game, and then if you shut it off and become more of a path deck and really slow down the likes of Gardevoir to get those big one-hit kills, you're really in a good sort of spot. I really like the 2 Roxanne and 1 Iona in these style decks. Having the 2 Roxanne, you can afford to get rid of one, and the opponent may not be prepared to see another sort of Roxanne, so you can get some extra wins, potentially that way there, but your opponent not really being prepared to understand exactly how the deck works. I really love 2 Super Rod. Instead of having a Clara in there, you could opt to go to 1 Super Rod, 1 Clara, but 2 Super Rod is really good because it works with Mirage Gate, and ways to guarantee you get your Sableye, your Cramorants, and other sort of Pokemon, because you'll constantly be attacking if any of the Pokemon may be prized. Pokegear is a way to you can guarantee to get your Chorus's Experiment out as early as obviously if you go second, which is exactly how this deck works. You want to try and get out that Lost Impact turn 2, or even a Lost Mine turn 2 is really, really strong. Jet Energy definitely helps propel the deck to that sort of situation by kind of giving that good option to Lost Box by making able to them to switch in a Comfy to the active spot and have a guaranteed retreat from it, which I absolutely love about Giratina. I think Spiritomb is definitely a really good inclusion in this deck, trying to slow down as much of your options as possible, and it's definitely one of those which you can easily switch out for a Drapion if you're expecting lots of Mew. Now, my number 4 is actually Fusion Mew. This deck obviously performing pretty well and definitely a talk of the town right now. Having really good matchups, I would say, kind of around the board today, but definitely struggling with the Lost Box of options and Arceus Giratina. Arceus Giratina still has that power to now get those big one-hit KOs, but Mew VMAX is the deck which obviously has been around for so long. I think we're coming up to nearly 2 years of Mew VMAX being legal, and it hasn't really left, I would say, sort of a top 5 contenders every single time. So I generally think that's a really good situation for it to be placed in the meta. Fusion Strike Energy is really good because if people are worried about ability lock like Ting Lu and Spiritomb, you attach your Fusion Strike Energy to your Genesect, all of a sudden they can use their abilities just so fine. So that's why Mew's kind of gone with this sort of list. And if we just look at the winning list from Japan Nationals a couple of weeks ago, Ice Cube's a very good contender in this one. So immediately to kind of do some bench sniping as well. And obviously having really good attackers. Cleansing Gloves is definitely your Mew VMAX, but more importantly, your Gardevoir matchup. So you can kind of get that extra sort of bump in there. You don't rely too much on your choice belts, which your choice belts can be used on your V-Stars and Cleansing Gloves. Obviously, really powerful against Gardevoir to get those big one-hit KOs. This list as well obviously plays a couple of cards here, but Lost City is really important because the likes of the thing about with Lost Box and Gardevoirs and sometimes even some other attackers, we're not playing as many attackers as usually. Potentially maybe 1 to 2 of certain attackers, if you think about it, the likes of Lost Box and Gardevoir, kind of getting rid of their really good the Vations or potentially the baby Gardevoirs, which do lots of damage in there, kind of like putting in the Lost Zone. It can really impact your opponent and not kind of like recycle them as quickly as possible and kind of get wins that way. And obviously Fusion Strike helps in that sort of matchup against obviously the likes of Ability Lock. Owner and Judge I really like, especially with the team out of Powpad. You want to have that disruption capability, and this is exactly where Mew thrives. Not playing the high counts of Path to Peak, so you end up actually getting worse your matchup into Path to Peak, but you do have that Lost Vacuum, which can really help disrupt it in Path to Peak and kind of replace it potentially with any of the other stadiums you may have in play. I really like Mew. I think it's in a really good spot. Definitely focusing more on the Future Strike build. It's the one which has played the most online tournaments, the one that has actually had the most better results has been Future Mew because Ability Lock is a thing, and who knows what's really going to happen over in NAIC in a couple of days' time. My number 3 pick is actually Lugia. Now, this is definitely a deck which hasn't actually got as many results as possible, only getting 1 top 8. But it has a really good matchup overall. It did, in fact, win, I believe, the junior division over in Japan Nationals and the single strike build. But if you just look at its matchups here, it's really, really powerful. And its bad matchup actually goes to Gardevoir, most likely because they're going more of the colorless build, a lot of testing it on Limitless. Lugia obviously has the amazing summoning star ability. We can basically put 2 of colorless Pokemon that down for rule box with Discard Pile onto the bench. You team out with Archeops to do huge amount of damage capability by spreading out as many of these special energies as possible. It has a really good capability to kind of like change between if you want to play the colorless build or a single strike. For me, I generally would probably be sleeving up the colorless build here. I like having the option to have them like 2 single price attackers. Luxray is by far potentially my favorite card of new format. We can just immediately put down to bench if you're behind in prizes. You have a reversal card which immediately attach into that, and you have your answer now to Flying Pikachu, other Lugia sort of decks there. And additionally, just doing 180 damage is really powerful because you could team up with either Sniper a little bit weirder or even Snorlax, Unfazed Fat, or potentially even Archeops. So it's really good to kind of like finish off the sort of attacks from like a Lugia V-Star or other sort of attackers as well, which I really like in this deck. Snorlax now doesn't have to fall asleep thanks to Therapy Energy. So having that option, Snorlax will constantly be potentially streaming 180 damage is really good, where if you think about the likes of just Lost Box decks, they kind of can struggle if they're not playing the V sort of decks. They're not really going to get those big one-hit KOs on your Snorlax in the play. So I really like that sort of option out there to really try and slow down the opponent as much as possible. Weird obviously is a really good inclusion in this deck. Try and flood the board out as much energy as possible, then switch and then use a Jet Energy to propel it into the active spot. Also move as many energies you might need on Weird to do 40 times the amount of energies that has attached to it. Really, really powerful to do those huge amount of damage capability. And you want to have that option to try and get out of a turn 2 summoning star, but playing a high count of Lugia, high count of searching cards, and more importantly, 2 Millions plus a Professor Barnett. So you have loads of ways to try and get out that Lugia summoning star turn 2. It's kind of how Lugia decks have kind of been built now. And this deck does play Collapse Stadium, which really helps you in the likes of your Lost Box matchup. Removing any of these big damage Pokemon is really how you kind of get those wins. And Drapion V is really good. Not only can you attack into those Mews for free, you can load up the energies and attack into Gardevoir to get those big one-hit KOs. Really like this deck. I really think this is really powerful. And if If you want to kind of see some single strike build, this is definitely an option which I've kind of been working on and has been performing well. Going with the Evotoll, so you have that single prize darkness attacker, which can get those big one-hit KOs on the likes of Mew and Gardevoir, which is really good. Stone Jonah, because still, like, we have a lot of them fighting weak Pokemon out there. It's not just Miraidons anymore. It is the likes of Arceus, which is definitely kind of rise up in popularity. And this list still plays the Luxray with reversal energy, because honestly, if you can just fit that package in any deck, it's really, really powerful. Just to put down a Pokemon straight on the bench and attack for 180 damage is really, really strong. And again, focusing more on kind of getting the Pokemon out, kind of getting your Archeops and Discard as quickly as possible while playing high counts of Tower of Darkness to draw into it, and obviously Ultra Ball, Capture Roma, Double Luminion, and Professor Barnett. I think Lugia is in a really good spot as well. That's why I've kind of put it down as my number 3 pick. And it can definitely be prepared to watch it, and this will make the graphic. So definitely be testing your Lugia. My number 2 pick actually goes to Lost Box. Doing pretty okay. They're getting multiple top 8s and a few top 4s and even a second place. You can see here its only bad matchup is in fact Lugia, surprisingly, on Limitless. I would definitely probably not say that if you're playing the Raikou sort of build. But I think Lost Box is in a really good spot. Definitely favoring more on their Turbo build, which is doing incredibly well there, but always keeping up that Sableye. Because having Sableye just immediately opens up so many avenues. This one here, we have multiple different attackers here. Having the Snorlax, Drapion, Radiant Greninja both draw and having an attacker, Raikou and Dragonite are really, really powerful in this one. Sky Stone can really help in your Mew matchup, because you can just attach it to Drapion, get that big one hit, get those 4 prizes on that Mew, and then you just need to worry about just using potentially either Dragonite or Raikou to chase down your the likes of the Genesect on the bench. I really like Lost Box right now in this format. Jet Energy and Artezone really help kind of like flavor out to make the deck as quick as possible. Kind of like search your, like putting down like your likes of Snorlax, Cramorant, Sableye, and even Comfey is really good. And Jet Energy to again propel them into the active spot. Super Rod is really powerful because you can really utilize and reuse your Mirage Gates as quickly as possible. There are obviously some sort of flaws to this sort of style deck. I think it's definitely going to have one of the biggest targets on there. So that's why Manaphy is definitely going to constantly be trying to recycle. Having Heavy Ball as well as multiple Super Rods kind of makes you constantly recycle your Manaphys, because in the likes of other sort of Lost Box decks and also Magnezones around there, you want to constantly be trying to keep your Manaphys out and play, because there is your probably biggest threat, because immediately if sometimes can take a 2 prize knockout on a Comfey or Sableye, you're in a huge sort of dilemma. I do think this deck, I do like the Raihan because it works really well with the V Pokemon, so you don't need to rely too much on getting like the Raikous, Dragonites, and Drapions kind of like set. And Clara is also very powerful because just getting back Psychic Energy plus Sableye for like near the ending of the game is really, really powerful. So this is definitely something which I would be sleeping up, really trying to understand. Lost Box will be up there. It kind of gained a few extra cards like Lost, Jet Energy, and Artisan, so definitely something to watch out for. And obviously, to no surprise, my top pick is obviously Gardevoir EX. This deck has been absolutely powerhousing by having pretty good matchups against both of it, winning a couple tournaments, getting 3 second place decks. So it's been in the finals, but think about like 5 times, which is insane. It's not 5 separate finals. Quite a lot of times it's both the winning and second place deck. But if you look at the top 4 and top 8, it's consistently cutting these events, consistently being up there as one of the most played archetypes. And if you're going to NAIC, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the most played deck. It did gain a few really, really powerful cards like Iona plus Reversal Energy. These combat mechanics really help propel Gardevoir XP with the strongest capability it can have. The ability just to put down an additional 90 extra damage if you're behind prizes and disrupt the opponent late sort of game by still having your colors out in place, so you're not as disruptive by zone as possible, really helps Gardevoir kind of get that, because it's always going to be behind in prizes, potentially its first or second turn. So Iona really, really helps with the consistency of this deck. Having a really good matchup against most of the Water Spray is really, really powerful. And if we just look at sort of the rough sort of list, which actually did do really well, this is a deck which I would consistently be potentially playing if I was going to NAIC. This deck here is really, really strong. You're focusing more on the Iona as your supporter of choice. Yes, it's really good, obviously, early game to get that 6, but in the late sort of game, it's really, really powerful to really, really help slow the opponent. Super Rod as well is really, really strong as well in this deck. So you'll constantly be, potentially you'll have Zacian V, you have 3 copies of them, or your Gardevoirs, you can constantly reuse them. And so you don't need to rely too much on like your Manaphys as well. It's definitely going to be a big target when you're playing against the likes of Miraidon and anything with Radiant Greninja in there. So you want to constantly be a way to recycle that in there with the likes of Super Rod, and then multiple ways to search out through there with the likes of Level Ball and obviously Ultra Ball. I really like this list as well. Collapse Stadium, again, really helps a matchup if your opponent's going to pretty much, one of your Pokemon is going to die very, very soon. Put a Collapse Stadium out there so you don't need to worry too much about those Sableye sort of sniping damages in the late sort of game. And Temple of Sinnoh, I know obviously it's bugged in live, but really helpful to slow down those Lugias out there and shutting down other reversal energies so they can't get the advantage on you. This isn't the only way to really play Gardevoir, but this is the build which I would potentially go with. The other build is definitely the reversal build here, which did in fact come second place a couple of weeks ago in the tournament. And I really like this style of deck. You are kind of going, this is based off the best of one. That's why you're playing the Mirage Step Curlier. You could potentially cut this to have that refinement Curlier as well. But having other attackers like Gallade, Luxray, and the other sort of Gallade is really, really powerful. Gallade to kind of search your deck for the special energies, the supporters you might need. The other Gallade to kind of help you in that Miraidon and Arceus matchup. And obviously Luxray, because you're playing reversal energies, why not play Luxray? I think it's honestly incredibly powerful. And we can also see here, we see the Mewtwo V Union. I think Mewtwo V Union is definitely one of those really, really powerful cards, and I think it works really well in this. Not only does it have 310 HP, it has the capability to put down 16 damage counters anywhere on the opponent's board, and obviously hit those huge 300 damage, which is pretty very, very powerful, and get that extra healing factor as well. You really rely on your super rods, so you'll constantly be recycling that and drawing through the likes of Professor's Research and Iona. One Path to Peak, and obviously to Azor Town, because you're playing so many you want to constantly be getting your Rolts out there and play as well as Manaphy, so that's why you're playing those sort of options out there to try and get them as quickly as possible. And Peonia, because you're playing Mewtwo V Union, you want to get out as quickly as possible and discard them with Refinement. I honestly think Gardevoir is in a really good spot right now. If I would say which was probably got the edge right now, I think the reversal energy is a little bit more complex to play. There's a lot more different avenues and different routes to play with. You've got to really understand exactly what you need for each matchup wise. Whereas I think the sort of the clean Gardevoir, the one which is just over here, I think this is definitely going to be probably the most popular sort of play sort of build, kind of maybe going with 10 Psychic and 2 Reversal with some changes you could have, and having more options to kind of bump out Path to the Peak, because I do think Path to the Peak will probably be one of the most played stadiums, purely on how powerful Gardevoir EX is. So I hope you found this really helpful and really insightful to kind of like understand what you think I think will be the tops of decks for NAIC. Leave a comment down below if you're going to NAIC and what deck you're really thinking to play. If I was going, I'd probably be playing either Gardevoir or Chien-Pao. These are decks that I've been testing the most, really understanding how each sort of deck works in sort of matchup wise. But I think Gardevoir EX is definitely a really safe pick, but you've got to be prepared to probably face lots of mirrors and people to tech against it. Obviously, because NAIC, the last huge tournament before Worlds in our sort of format, we're going to see so much surprise, and I can't wait to cover all of it next week. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and comment down below the decks which you want to kind of do well at NAIC, and I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.